When our loved ones fall victim to acts of unspeakable violence, we go through stages of grief. First comes the shock, then the heartbreak. Then we go on the maddening journey of seeking justice. We search for the killer and hope that his punishment fits the crime. But in this pursuit, authorities can be guilty of a rush to judgment. When this happens, killers go free, while the innocent serve out a sentence for a crime they never committed. And this is where our story begins. Its beauty will captivate you. Its extraordinary views will leave you breathless. The canyons, trails, and waterfalls once explored will draw you back again and again. This is Starved Rock State Park in Illinois, a park steeped in tragic Native American lore. From a band of Indians left to starve upon a huge rock, to a heartbroken princess that jumped 140 feet to her death. Legend has it that an Illinois chief's daughter and her lover jumped into the river and drowned when warring tribes prevented their marriage. But the tragic history of Starved Rock doesn't end there. Frances Murphy, Mildred Lindquist, Lillian Oding. They were best friends and neighbors. Their husbands were prominent executives. They were all pillars of their Riverside community. Each was devoted to home, church, and civic affairs. The three best friends were just looking to get away for a few days. A little rest, a little hiking, a break from their hectic lives. But their getaway to Starved Rock State Park turned out to be anything but what they were seeking. Evil would find them and turn their vacation into a nightmare. This is Frances. She was 47 years old when she was murdered. Frances was an avid gardener, and she adored her roses. In between raising her 4 children and tending her flowers, Frances was once the society editor of the Moline, Illinois Dispatch, and served on the Riverside Grade School Board. This is Mildred. She was 50 years old when she was murdered. Mildred had been past president of the Women's Society at her church and past president of the Riverside Friends of the Library. The mother of 2 was also a former member of the Riverside Grade School Board of Education. A dear friend of hers wistfully stated, Mildred had a marvelous personality. She always had a smile. This is Lillian. She was 50 years old when she was murdered. Lillian, a native of Northern Ireland and a mother of 3, belonged to the Riverside Garden Club. Her husband had recently suffered a heart attack, and she had nursed him back to health. A friend and neighbor described Lillian as one of the most kind, most compassionate souls she had ever known. This is Chester Weger. Chester was just 21 years old when he was accused of killing the aforementioned women from Riverside, Illinois. He was married and the father of 2. He worked as a dishwasher at the Starved Rock Lodge when the bodies of Frances, Mildred, and Lillian were discovered. So why did the focus of the investigation turn to Weger? Chester Weger had many run-ins with the law. Did his sketchy past automatically make him a scapegoat in a case that was quickly going cold? Well, to answer that question, we need to take a closer look at Weger's record to see what moved him to the top of the suspects list. LaSalle, Illinois Police Chief James Callahan said that records show that Chester's problems began early in life. At the age of 12, he was accused of assaulting an 8-year-old girl. The proceedings were later dismissed. In 1955, Weger was arrested after creating a disturbance at a movie theater. 2 years later, he went AWOL after joining the Marines, but no details were given about the misconduct. Weger would later state that he was honorably discharged. Arrests were made in 1959 and 1960 when Weger refused to show ID when attempting to purchase alcohol. LaSalle police received a call on August 20, 1960, after Weger tried to purchase shotgun shells. He reportedly told the store proprietor that he was going to kill a man that raped his wife. Weger would later try to obtain a warrant for the arrest of the alleged rapist. We can now see that Weger had 2 strikes against him from the beginning, one being his prior arrest and 2 being his employment at the lodge that put him near the scene of the crime. Slowly, the pieces of the investigation were starting to come together. But for now, let's just focus on the details of the murders themselves. On Monday, March 14, 1960, the 3 victims said farewell to their families and drove over 90 miles to Starved Rock State Park in Francis Murphy's station wagon. Upon arrival, the ladies checked in at the lodge and had a soda before deciding to hike to St. Louis Canyon to admire a frozen waterfall. The area was at the far end of the park, about a mile from the lodge, and had only one entrance. The last known person to see the women alive was a janitor at the lodge. He saw the 3 best friends set out on the trail. Authorities believed from the start of the investigation that more than one psychopath began following the women along the trail. They reported that it would have been difficult for one man to corner and subdue 3 middle-aged women, even in the box-like setting of St. Louis Canyon. Once cornered, the women were molested and bludgeoned to death. Their bodies were dragged inside a sand cave set in a cliff 5 feet above the canyon floor. Any screams or cries for help would have been cut off by the 150 feet sheer walls of the canyon that surrounded the murder scene. On the evening of the 14th, George Oding called his wife at the lodge after she had promised to call him and didn't. An employee told Mr. Oding that his wife was unavailable. The next day, Oding tried once again to contact his wife. The front desk stated that Mrs. Oding and her friends were out at the time. That night, a snowstorm hit the park area with blizzard-like conditions. On March 16th, Mr. Oding once again phoned the lodge and asked the manager to check on his wife. Mr. Oding was notified that the beds had not been slept in and their luggage had not been opened. Even more troubling was the fact that Mrs. Murphy's station wagon had not been moved since the women checked in. Oding quickly made a phone call to his friend, the director of the Chicago Crime Commission, and explained that his wife and her friends had been missing for over 40 hours. The LaSalle County Sheriff's Office was notified, and a search began. 36 boys aged 16 to 19 years old, undergoing rehabilitation at a state youth camp nearby, were called to join the search. The boys helped maintain Starved Rock as part of the program and were familiar with the 1,436 acres of the park. Under the guidance of camp counselor Henry Wolford, 6 of the boys went on the hunt for the missing women. Wolford stated that if the women were followed and met with foul play, there were only 2 parts of the park where they would have been spotted. One spot would have been from the lodge itself. The other spot was where the part of the trail goes along the highway. 20 minutes after their search began, the party of 6 boys located the bodies of the 3 women. Just beyond the knee-deep snow and temperatures just above 22 degrees, the victims lie side by side in pools of frozen blood inside a cave. 2 of the women were found naked from the waist down. The third was clothed only in a girdle. Their heads were bloodied and battered, with bruising over much of their bodies. Streaks of blood were found on the floor of the canyon, with blood spots on the path leading into the canyon. The investigation was hampered by the snow that had fallen shortly after the women were murdered. Authorities used flamethrowers to melt the snow in order to search for clues. It was evident that a violent struggle had taken place. The brutality of the attack was marked by a missing fingertip of one of the victims. The ladies from Riverside fought bravely during the last moments of their lives. A broken piece from a pair of eyeglasses, a piece of a brown comb, battered binoculars, a broken camera strap, and a bloody tree limb measuring 3 feet long and weighing 10 pounds all bared witness to a desperate attempt to stave off a brutal attack. Pieces of red cord were found around the wrists of 2 of the victims. It was theorized that 2 or more assailants tied the 2 women together while the third was attacked. In a frantic attempt to avoid a similar fate, the women found the strength to pull apart. Authorities believe the attack started near the frozen waterfall that drew the women to that location on that fateful day. After the women were killed, their bodies were placed in a cave and appeared to be deliberately arranged in a line at the mouth of the cave. 2 women lay side by side, and the third was just 4 feet away. All were face up. Why would someone kill these women? Who were authorities looking for? 70 state troopers, sheriff's deputies, and other agents searched for the answers during the 2 months following the slayings. A total of $65,000 was spent during that time, and yet officials were no closer to solving the murders. Detectives interviewed over 15,000 people, resulting in 254 persons of interest, of which 31 were administered lie detector tests. 800 leads and tips came in. 21,360 man-hours went into the search for the killer or killers. On March 25th, just weeks after the murders, a determined Sheriff Ray Utzi declared in a statement, "We're going to solve this case. I don't know where or how long it will be, but we will." 8 months later, Utzi fulfilled his promise. Facing reporters, the weary sheriff announced that the man responsible in the triple slaying at Starved Rock was in police custody after confessing to the killings. That man was Chester Weger. Once it was determined that the cord found on the victims was a match to the cord used in the lodge kitchen, polygraphs were given to all lodge employees on September 26, 1960. John Reed conducted Weger's polygraph and found discrepancies in his statements concerning scratches on his face. Weger's co-workers claimed to have seen the marks on his face around the time of the murders. Weger changed his account of how the scratches occurred from shaving to being scratched by a cat. Even though Weger passed previous polygraphs, the ones given in September were now coming back as inconclusive. Reed stated that Weger told him, "Listen, I know the cops haven't got any evidence on me, and I haven't a thing to worry about. You can talk to me all night, and I'm not going to tell you anything. There's an electric chair in this case, and I know it." Reed urged former state's attorney Harlan Warren to forget all other suspects and concentrate on Weger. Reed even suggested taking Weger's jacket to the lab to check for blood spots. Sheriff Utzi later admitted that Weger had been a special object of interest from the outset because of his brushes with the law. Utzi put Weger under 24-hour surveillance for a month after a second inconclusive polygraph test. Authorities were beginning to build their case against Weger. He was interrogated extensively about the murders. Other crimes committed in the area were now coming into question. A stack of photos that included a shot of Weger were given to a teen that had been assaulted at a nearby park in 1959. She positively ID'd Weger. With Weger now in custody, authorities were able to get him to sign a confession of the triple murders. Law enforcement was going to make sure Weger wasn't going to be set free. In addition to the triple murders, Weger was charged with assault with the intent to rape and assault with a deadly weapon in the incident involving a teenage girl on September 13, 1959. He was also charged with armed robbery and larceny of her male companion. More charges were brought stemming from a purse-snatching case in July of 1959. Weger was again charged with robbery and larceny. Sheriff Utzi wanted even more from Weger than just a signed confession. He wanted Chester Weger to go back to Starved Rock and reenact the murders. With Weger handcuffed and held by a chain leash to Sheriff Utzi, he was led back to the scene of the crime. The spectacle drew large crowds of newsmen, so large that deputies found it hard to keep the newsmen back. Utzi had to threaten that if they didn't keep their distance, the prisoner would be returned to the county jail. Standing in the snowy canyon in the frigid temperature, shackled and leashed, Weger began to speak of the brutal murders. Weger quietly said, "It only started out as a robbery." He spotted the women at the canyon entrance as they were leaving. Weger said that he attempted to snatch a camera case carried by one of the women. The strap broke and another woman struck him on the head with a pair of binoculars. He said he pleaded with the women to return to the canyon's dead end where he herded them into the cave. He said he tied the hands and feet of Mrs. Oding and Mrs. Lindquist together, and then did the same to Mrs. Murphy, who sat near her companions. Weger said, "I assured them that someone would come and untie them after I made my escape." He said he only got a short distance away when Mrs. Murphy was able to untie herself and began running after him. She grabbed at the collar of his jacket and started punching him. Weger claimed that he picked up a tree limb and struck her on the back of the head. He stated, "I carried Mrs. Murphy back to the cave, and as I laid her down, the other women started hitting and kicking me." Weger said he clubbed the two women until they were dead. By this time, Mrs. Murphy had gotten to her feet and struck him with her binoculars, which broke. He said he used the club and binoculars to kill her. Weger showed how he dragged the victims to the rear of the cave to conceal them from a low-flying plane at the time of the crime. He tore off some of their clothes to make it look like a sex crime. When asked why he committed the slayings, he said, "I just didn't want the women to identify me after I tried to rob them." Headlines and photos of the reenactment became part of the media frenzy surrounding the case. It sold newspapers. It quelled the public's fear of a killer roaming the streets. It made law enforcement look like heroes. But what everyone forgot was a well-publicized 40-page report by criminologist William Jansen, a report that gave a totally different scenario of how the women were killed. This will conclude part 1 of our 2-part special covering the Starved Rock murders. Don't forget to tune in to part 2 tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you're getting to this video a little late, a link to part 2 will be provided at the end of this video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in today. If you like our videos and would like to help our channel grow, please consider sharing this video with a friend. Also, if you aren't already subscribed to EOJ, please consider doing so. It's completely free, and it's the best way to stay in the loop about our channel and get notified when videos will be uploaded. As always, stay well and be safe. Until we see you again with another cold case, this has been Eye on Justice.